Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so excited to start our evening together. This is BU Beyond the Classroom podcast, and I'm super excited to have joining me this evening Christine and Georgia, co founders of Making the Grade Project, which is an organization with a mission to empower educators starting with the very beginning of their careers. And so while they specialize in helping teachers in their home state of Massachusetts to pass the MTEL, they also support teachers everywhere in setting up their classrooms and careers for success. Christine and Georgia each spent over a decade in the K 12 classroom setting before deciding it was time to make a change and support education in a different way. They've worked with hundreds of teachers over the years through thousands of workshops, classes, and one on one sessions, and currently provide both individual educators and educational organizations with their support. You may have known, no, you may know them from their podcast, Making the Grade, where they share educator stories from all over the world, each at different points of their teaching journeys. So I'm very excited that you all made space to join me today, Christine and Georgia, and really just happy to see you all again and dive into what I think is going to be some juicy conversation for educators. But let me ask first, is there anything else that you would like to share with your intro? Anything that maybe I left out or that you want to add some voiceover to?
Ooh, I don't think so. You made us feel really special in that intro. So you said it really well. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. We're just really excited to be here. We loved having you on our podcast, and it's an honor to be on your platform now.
Thank
Yes.
you. And I think it should be said, I want to just publicly thank the both of you because it was after being in your space and on your podcast, you put the seed in my mind of what other ways that I can connect with educators. And so from that conversation, this was born. So I want to say thank you. And I think it's a testament to you never know who you're going to meet in your life that's going to plant something within you and what that could possibly grow into later. So thank you for that.
Oh. Yeah, I remember when you were on our show, we were like, wow, she's a natural. She's so inspiring, so excited and passionate about what you do. It's so clear and extremely well spoken. It took Georgia and I so many takes to get our intro down. And I was just like, wow, look at her just come on and just with ease, you know? So you can't hide that talent. You got to share it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I hold on to those words. And so, yeah, I just want to dive in. Another wonderful casual conversation. I just feel blessed to be able to even just share space with other educators who have expanded what it means to be an educator, right? Because you are still educating others. You are simply doing it in a different way that is outside the confines and the structures of the K 12 system. And so I do want us to dive into that as much as possible and let the conversation flow. But before we dive there and go there, I wanted to just kind of get your insights, a little current events. I'll be honest, I don't watch the news every day. It can be a little sad, but I went down a rabbit hole on YouTube recently and was just seeing a lot of updates in the news nationwide about both the mass exodus of educators leaving the school system. I believe we're at like 55% of educators that were asked said that they're thinking about leaving the education system. And then there's also, which seems like a contradiction, right? Mass layoffs. So on one hand, you have folks that are like, I'm out of here. And then on the other, the school districts are saying, you're out of here. And we know a lot of that has to do with ESSER and the pandemic, and there was a lot of hiring. Now there's no money left to keep those folks with their jobs. So there's a lot going on. But I just wanted to get your opinion, your thoughts, your insights on, especially post pandemic. And I know you've talked to a lot of educators. What are you seeing and what's coming up for you around this whole idea of there are a lot of teachers who are just, burnt out and wanting to leave, and the districts are not really making it too easy by laying a lot of people off?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one that I feel like kind of started us down the path of the work that we're doing now with teachers. So when we both left the classroom around 2020, like 2021, the pandemic, and I actually left before the pandemic. I just had my first baby, and I knew I was going to take a year-long leave of absence. And during that time was when other opportunities within education, in a more flexible way, became available to me. But what we noticed, and Georgia can speak to this too because she was in the classroom a little bit longer during that time. But what we've noticed in the last few years, our educator prep programs in our area, the numbers are dwindling. A lot of education departments are like being cut in half even, so people are kind of questioning even getting into the field in the first place. And part of that, I think, things like high stakes testing, there are barriers in the way for sure. And part of that is too, I think, that the generation coming up, a lot of like my undergrad classes that I've had, they're doing a better job at speaking up about what they need and boundaries and things that we might not have in our generation done well. Speaking for myself, I don't think I did that as well as I could have when I was in the classroom. And I think that would have changed the outcome. So that's kind of led us into the work that we do because we're like, excellent educators need to get to the field in the first place. What is stopping them? And then how can we help them to be set up for success, maybe even in ways that we weren't necessarily? So, yeah, it definitely, it's a great question. And it's one we think about constantly, but I think that's a huge piece of it. Just the even very beginning of their careers in the classroom and what that looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack in that question, but it's an important one that needs to be talked about more. And I echo everything Christine said. Um, I think there's a lot of reasons. That's the short answer. There's a lot of reasons why teachers are leaving. I think the pandemic brought to light, how amazing teachers were. We were, oh my gosh, they're heroes. And then very quickly, that kind of changed and kind of went back to, well, they're just expected to do all of these things, and we're going to pile on more for them. Whereas I think a lot of other professions after the pandemic were given more support, more mental health days, and more understanding and things of that nature. Where didn't see that so much in the teacher setting, and so I think younger people are maybe like, I can leave now and I can do something else because there's lots of platforms like this one that are sharing you can use your teacher voice in so many ways, which is incredible because we have always said from the get-go with our podcast that teachers should stay in the classroom if it works for them, and they should leave if that's what works for them. Everyone should do what's best for them at any given moment, and we're always evolving and changing. And I think some of the older generation of teachers are also leaving because they're just feeling fed up with all the changes, and there's new technologies that are hard to grasp, and just more and more is put on their plate, and support is taken away, and it's kind of this just conundrum of this doesn't make sense. More is expected of me, but I'm getting less in return. So,
Yeah.
I think there's just a lot of reasons.
Yeah. That's really, really powerful. And as you were talking, two things came to my mind. One, I know, Christine, you mentioned like you were heading into maternity leave. And so then, there's kind of like that segue out of the role that you were previously in, and that, you, Georgia, stayed a little bit longer. So my first kind of follow-up question is, can you talk a little bit more about what was the catalyst or the thing that kind of led you to make the decision to transition out, since you stayed like a little bit longer than Christine did?
Yes. Um, my catalyst had a lot to do with COVID. I taught the youngest kids, the pre-K kids who I love. I love children. I always wanted to teach that age group. And if I ever went back to the classroom, that would be my choice. They're just my favorite age for a lot of reasons. That being said, they're the age group that needs the most. They need a lot of support, a lot of one-on-one for everything. And I love that. I love that when I have someone helping me out. It's hard to be a pre-K teacher without an assistant. And I always thought very much of my paraprofessionals as my equals because they did just as much, if not more, than I did when it came to the hands-on teaching day to day. And because of COVID, we were short-staffed, and people were pulled to help in various grades that they normally weren't in, or people were leaving because they just didn't feel comfortable being in a school setting, even with the masks and the social distancing. So I was left by myself a lot in the classroom, and I could handle it, and I still loved what I was doing, but it was kind of just I don't know, an aha moment for me that I was feeling really tired and a little bit burnt out, I guess maybe a lot burnt out. And it just kind of pushed me to realize I need a break. I don't know exactly what that break is going to look like or what's going to come from it, but I need to leave. It's just the time has come, and I'm gonna figure it out. And so that was kind of just my final straw. And it always been in the back of my mind, starting a business. And I kind of started a bunch of small stuff while I was still in the classroom that contributes to where I am now. But yeah, it was always a little bit in the back of my mind. And I think that last year, where COVID just made things exponentially harder in the classroom, was just kind of like my cue. It's like the universe telling me it's time, go. There's something bigger. There's something else out there, and you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just my reason.
And just listening to Georgia and as an observer, I just wanted to like state for the record that Georgia absolutely handled it. Like, and she was and is entirely capable of taking care of children in that sense, like all day and by herself. And like she is like that superstar teacher, and she was still feeling like I need more support. And she went about the proper channels asking for it, and she did all the right things, and she was still feeling like this calling and this like this is a lot, and I feel like it's important for listeners to know like she is brilliant and well resourced and like so well trained and so capable and like that rock star teacher that it's not that like she was missing anything, but I feel like oftentimes teachers come to us and they're like, what was I doing wrong? Or, like I'm feeling overwhelmed or I'm feeling burnt out. And I think one of her union reps said, like, you're not feeling burnt out, like the system is broken. And I think that's a better way of kind of thinking about it. And because, for well resourced, like completely knowledgeable and passionate teachers to be feeling that way, like that's a bigger problem, so.
I'm so glad that you said that, because a lot of my conversations recently it's around that idea. Like I tell folks that this one guy, I was at this conference, and this one guy that I used to work with like years ago, and we just happened to cross paths, and he's like, "Oh, you're the one," he's jokingly but probably serious. I don't know. Like, "Oh, you're the one, taking educators out of the system, out of their jobs." And I was like, "No, no, no." Like, let's not confuse what's really happening here. I still love students. I'm friends with many of my students' parents. I'm watching the class of 2024 pictures go up as they're graduating, and like tears on Facebook, like, congratulations, so proud of you. So I think there are, to your point, Christine, many of us who are very well versed in pedagogy, deeply loved and are deeply passionate about the work that we did in the education system, and yet still we are leaving, which is very different from which there are some people who are in the system, but that's with any industry, right? That maybe they got into it for the summers, or maybe they don't really like it, or there's some other reason. And I always tell people, I don't communicate. Those aren't my teacher friends. Like the teachers that I communicate with, to your point, are ones who are like, I thought me too. Like I thought I was going to be in this forever. I thought I was going to open up my own school. Like I'm in it to win it. I went back to school to get another degree. I'm like moving up. I'm an assistant principal. Like I'm doing this because I care. I deeply want to do it. And even me, after 15 years, was like, is is it me? And so I'm glad that you named that, because people need to know it is the system. It is what is required now is systemic change. And I've been more of an advocate of maybe the system in the way that it's designed, and because it takes so long for real change to happen, maybe they should create policies and procedures that align with the truth, which is young teachers are coming in, and after a certain amount of time, they're probably going to transition out. And so, how can we create, a system and policies and procedures, knowing that that is the reality, so that teachers don't feel like I did
Mhm.
something bad because I left.
Yeah.
Um,
No, and to your point too, thinking about you, so you asked why teachers are leaving, and then why do we think that there are so many cuts being happen and people being laid off at the same time? Like that shouldn't be the case, but in Massachusetts, at least, it feels like that is actually kind of a little more positive. And I guess the lens that I'm looking at that through is we've had like probably historic union walkouts around Massachusetts over the last year. Like, I don't ever remember that many cities and towns protesting and striking for days on end to get proper pay and benefits and maternity leave. And so that is something that we never saw, in our time in the classroom or even before that. So like that's like a hopeful thing, I think, like a hopeful observation. So at the same time, it's like, yes, jobs are being cut, but people are being paid appropriately, getting there, paid appropriately, and benefits are changing. And I think that unions are trying to, slowly move the needle in a positive direction. And maybe people are like actually looking at budget line items now and paying more attention to that stuff. So I'm hopeful that that's a good thing, at least from what we see in Massachusetts. It seems like more attention is getting paid to the conditions of teachers in schools and what that looks like and why it's been a problem.
yeah. Yeah, I remain hopeful as well, and I think what we have on our side as a benefit is being on the other side, being able to speak to things in ways that perhaps, like, sure, there are some educators who are part of unions and who are participating in, things like walkouts, but for those who cannot, um, because we've been there, but we're not there, so we're not gonna. There's no risk and factor in terms of like losing our jobs to be able to speak out on behalf of from our own lived experience. I wanted to go back to Georgia, what you mentioned earlier when you were sharing about, your transition, and you had mentioned, there were some businesses that you had started, and that journey that led to what you and Christine have created together. And so can you talk a little bit more about that journey? And I'd love to hear from both of you, what this journey was, from, if you go all the way back in time, you're
Mhm.
in the classroom, you get something in your mind of, I think I want to do something or explore a business or start a thing, to where you are now. Tell us more about that journey for each of you.
Sure, sure. Um, I think, first of all, I want to start by saying teachers make great business owners because we're very organized, we're very creative, we're very good with people, we're very patient. Could go on and on about the list that make a list of qualities in a great teacher, and all of those translate so well to being a business owner. And so I think I always had an entrepreneurial spirit. My parents were entrepreneurs. My now husband is an entrepreneur. And so I kind of saw that a lot in my life and always wanted to go into teaching, but I think maybe it was always there in the background a tiny bit, even before I even realized. And so when I was still in the classroom, I dabbled in a few different things. I got my real estate license to do on the side. For anyone listening who doesn't know this, a lot of teachers have side jobs because they need them. Just want to throw that out there.
Yes.
Um, but that led me to being sort of like a team assistant, which I really loved. Like, the background of like organizing things for the team, creating content for the team, which kind of led me to creating websites on the side and led me to finding Canva, which Canva is my most favorite platform in the entire world. We use it all the time in our business, but makes it really easy to create beautiful content for small businesses, for anything really, actually. So I really got some practice with what it takes to be on the back end of a business and what it takes to create marketing material for a business as well. And that translated in the classroom. I created websites for my parents, the students' parents for COVID to log on, see what we were learning about, things like that. And was able to share that with other teachers too, how to create stuff for their classroom, both virtually and stuff you can print out using Canva. And so I never really thought I could leave the classroom and start an education business, but Christine left the classroom and started working in education in a different way. And so she kind of inspired me that that was possible, that maybe I could take these skills and use them in an entrepreneurial teacher way, which we all now know the term entrepreneur, which is, combining educator and entrepreneur. And I absolutely love that term. And so after leaving, Christine and I just started having conversations of our classroom days, and that led us to starting our podcast, where we created this platform, and our goal with it was to let teachers share their stories and see what came of it. And in doing that, we met you, we met so many wonderful educators from all over the world, some still in the classroom, some finding other paths. And even though we know there's this problem where teachers are leaving, teachers are feeling unsupported, we still believe in education, and we want teachers who want to be teachers to stay if that's what's meant for them. And that's kind of what led us to creating our Making the Grade project, where we are supporting teachers in that journey of becoming teachers and giving them the tools for success to stay. So a long-winded answer. I hope it answers your question.
No, that was a beautiful story. Just I thank you for you give me a visual of the journey, and I think that's important for educators to hear. And I love to just pass it over to Christine to just share your journey as well.
Yeah, no, so I wouldn't say that I ever had a moment where I was like, oh, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur and start a business. I kind of I guess like it's funny, I never thought about it in this way until I was listening to Georgia, and I hit a point with, so I guess let me rewind. So I as well both, my parents are entrepreneurs, my husband is an entrepreneur. So I guess that has always been around as well, and I've always loved the idea of being able to do something for yourself. So when I left the classroom, really the main reason why was because it was a unique role, supporting teachers in a more flexible way that was remote during the pandemic when I had a tiny baby at home, and I was like, that's perfect, I'm going to try this out. And what kind of led me into the idea of like, oh, maybe I could start something is getting inspired by watching Georgia do it as well, and like do and explore different skills and learn new skills. And it didn't need to be quite as outside the box as I think I was envisioning what something like that would look like for me. And I just kept seeing a need for the support for teachers in this way. And I kept running into the same problem over and over again, which was teachers were coming to me saying, oh, I've taken this test prep course and I'm still not passing, and I've spent so much money and so much time and I cannot pass. And I'm like, why am I getting all of these people? If you're going to, this prep, why is it not what is not working here? And then I saw the problem and I got mad about it, because I'm like, all of my neurodiverse learners, all of my learners who speak English as a second language, all of the learners who don't have standardized test taking experience are the ones not passing. I was like, this is not okay. Why don't people care about this? And I think that's kind of what drove me to help more people in that area. I'm like, why? These are the educators that we need in front of our students. We need classrooms to look different because the world is a unique place, and we need that represented in our classrooms, like absolutely. So I think that's kind of what led me into like the idea of, okay, maybe this is a bigger need, maybe this is something that organizations could use help with a unique approach. I think my background in special ed, and then Georgia's content creation background, and her approach of like thinking of things from a universal design perspective and like user perspective. I think all of that just kind of came together really nicely. So yeah, a long-winded answer, but yeah, I guess I got mad about a problem and inspired by my best friend, and it kind of culminated in a nice way.
Yes. And I think that's what it's supposed to be, honestly. When I talk to my clients and any educators who send me DMs and are just asking me, like, how did you do this? The big thing that I hope folks take away from any interactions with me is when you're thinking about starting a business, right? Like, you should be solving a problem, and it should be something that you're passionate about, right? And so it sounds like, again, you all are still educating people, just in a different way, a different capacity. But it's also something that you deeply care about, which I think will add to that level of sustainability when you get to days in your business and your in the work that you do with others, where there might be some challenges. Which brings me to my next wondering is, when you think about your life now, post working, I call it 9 to 5, but 7 to 2, 8 to 3, outside of the school system, what would you say has been, if you could pick one, your biggest benefit from having the lifestyle that you have now versus when you were in the school system, and then your greatest challenge? So one benefit and one challenge.
This is a good question.
Yeah.
A benefit comes easier to me to think of a benefit. And I will say, by no means do I feel like I'm working less. We work really hard on our business. And if you want to be an entrepreneur, you're going to work really hard. And I think sometimes people look at owning a business as, oh, it's so easy. You make your own hours and, la di da. And it can be that way, but it's a lot of work in the beginning to lay the groundwork to be a successful business. And so we are always working, even if we're not, technically together or, on a Zoom or whatnot. Like, things are always in your mind of what do I need to do for my business tomorrow or tonight, or, how can we grow? How can we be better? And so we still work a lot, but it's on our own terms, and we can do it from wherever, whenever. And there's just that flexibility and freedom piece that Christine mentioned that she was yearning for when she left because she had a baby. And when I left, I had that yearning as well. I wanted to travel. I wanted to have new experiences. And when you're working the quote unquote 9 to 5 in the classroom, it's really hard to do that. Even a typical 9 to 5 like office job, you get to take your own vacation time, and you get to do, take days off here and there. As a teacher, you don't. You get your allotted time, and that's kind of it. And so that flexibility is just not a part of the teacher career. And I think Christine and I, both of our values kind of shifted at around the same time, where flexibility was really important to us. And before we had our own families, maybe that was less important because that's the stage we were in at that time. But the stage we're at right now, that flexibility piece is huge. And so that was what I would say is the biggest benefit to what we're doing. We're working on our own terms, and that's really wonderful.
Yeah, I echo all that. It's funny when you said benefit and, a challenge, all I kept thinking of were benefits. And that's not to say that there aren't challenges, because there are, but I think the benefits outweigh the challenges for sure. And so definitely flexibility is a top of the list. But also just, I feel like when I think of the challenges, all of them have been overcome by the benefits that I found personally. So like any of the challenges that I think about are, when we were first putting ourselves out there and you're told no, or you're brushed off, or you're not really listened to. And it feels a little like, I don't know, what's the word?
It's hard. You
Yeah.
feel your feelings hurt a little bit.
Yeah. And we're pretty thick skinned. And like now,
Yeah.
like even a few months in, we're just like, okay, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
the next one. But I think that benefit of building my confidence in a way that I had never experienced before, in building a business and building a brand and putting myself out there in that way, outweighs the challenge of it, because now it's just like, oh, it just rolls off my back. Like, oh, you don't want to work? That's fine. Cool. Like, I wish you well, and I'll find someone who will. And I think it's less daunting. I don't know. It feels like more opportunity, and it's probably because we're obviously at the beginning of our business, and we're starting to get some big contracts and like partnerships and exciting calls and exciting things. But when I think back to the moments of like, oh, we just put in a lot of work on this proposal, and like they ended up going with an instructor they already have or something, and like it feels like, oh, that's a bummer, and like, but then I think you just keep moving. And it's like, okay, well, reflect on that. And why did they? Is there anything we could have done differently?
Mm,
What's the lesson here? Sometimes there is, sometimes there's not. Sometimes it's something you can change, sometimes it's not as well. And knowing when to keep moving, I guess. So
mhm,
we like to reflect, talk about it. I remember one call when I was driving and I had a quick little cry. I was like, I really wanted that one. I was like, okay, on to the next. And like they came around later, and I think we're partnering with them soon. So it all comes around when it's supposed to. It's all
yeah.
happening in the way that it should. And I think
Mhm.
truly being able to believe that as you go is one of the biggest benefits as well. So
Ah, woman after my own heart, because that is like I truly believe that there is. I meant to make a post. Maybe I'll do it. Maybe this week. There is something about faith that you have to have some element of, which is why my stuff is called Believe Beyond You. You have to literally believe beyond where you see yourself today. You have to really believe that this vision that you all have for your business, how you are really expanding, making the grade, and all of the different touch points and the ways that you're supporting educators and beyond. Like, you have to have that faith element to be able to push past the rejections and the no callbacks, or you worked on the proposal and it's like, what, you chose somebody else, because
mhm,
it has nothing to do with your capabilities, right? It's just a matter of, you have to get through the forest of the nose until you get to that, um, the
Mhm.
the treasure at the end of the rainbow, and get to that yes. And we just, like you said, like, yeah, it's thick skin, and it does build even thicker skin. And we always learn something from the nose. So it's like,
mhm,
okay,
Right.
10 no's to get to this one yes, that's a really big yes. Those 10 no's
Mhm.
are worth it.
yes,
You can't take it personally. You can't take the no's personally. You have to just
Man.
it's not you. It's just there's a million reasons someone would say no. Christine and I were just talking about this today, and you
mhm,
can't take it personal, and that's important to remember. And something that I like to like remember when we're trying to go after a certain contract or really want something to happen, or I think this can be for anybody when you're making a big decision. Like,
Mhm.
if you really want something so bad, tell yourself it's going to happen or something better is going to happen. And
Yes.
sometimes for that better thing, that no had to happen for that better thing. And you can't see it in the moment, but eventually you do. And you're like, okay, I get it now. So just
Yeah.
trust it.
Yes, I love that. Oh, this is giving me like goosebumps. Like, oh, I want to hug y'all in virtually. Like, I believe. And I'm glad you all brought up contracts. I see. Let me just say, I was about to let you all go. 'Cause I was like, oh, 30 minutes. But now I have to ask at least one more question,
No.
because you brought it up. So now the people are going to want to know, as do I. There are a lot of educators, who are doing more service-based work when they're thinking about wanting to start something of their own. And some of that is attached to school systems, and some of that is not. And so you all mentioned part of one of the elements of your business is contracts. Can you just speak a little bit for our educator friends out there who, and I actually am thinking about a particular person I spoke to recently, who shared with me that they have some passions that they really want to elevate, some concerns in their particular state, and they would love to work with their city or with their school districts there, and they're just trying to navigate, like, one, starting the business, which is one part of it, but then when you have the business, getting a contract can sometimes seem impossible and foreign, and like, what is even the first step? So can you speak a little bit to, even if it's in more general terms, because every state is different, what was that process like to add that element to your business? And yeah, share that with the educators.
involved. It's really involved.
It is.
Not to
It
scare people, but it's involved. I feel like we had a wonderful mentor, Losha. Well, we can share out her details too about walking people through contracts in the K to 12 specific school sense. But yeah, the word that comes to mind is just involved a lot of learning, a lot of every organization does it differently. It took us a lot of time to even kind of wrap our head around what that would look like for us. And we still, like Georgia today, we we were going over pricing and we're like, every organization charges differently. It's just very unique. Yeah.
And every organization has a different process, right? So I will say for the most part, the organizations we've partnered with, it's a lot of back and forth, a lot of conversations, multiple calls. You know, you're not going to send an email, hey, do you want to work together? And sure, send over a contract. It's a lot more than that. But that being said, there are those weird situations where it happened last week. Someone said, can you do a workshop like this? And we said, no, but we can do it like this. And he said, cool, I'll send over a contract next month. Like, you have a deal. We're like, okay, but that's not typical. And so there's that, and there's kind of everything in between. Sometimes the organization will write up the contract, and you have to look over it and sign it and make sure everything looks good on your end. Sometimes they want you to write it and send it over. So I don't want to make anyone overwhelmed or confused, but I will say it really varies in state to state, organization to organization, how they want it done. But it's definitely important to have a contract in place to make sure everyone's agreeing on what's being offered and what's being delivered. So don't skip out on it. There's lots of resources and templates out there, and highly, highly recommend LOSHA for consulting contracts in particular. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people that offer similar support. So don't be afraid to ask for help. You don't have to do this alone. It's a lot to navigate, and we wouldn't be where we are if we didn't ask for a lot of help.
And you said that's LOSHA?
Yes.
Yes. She has a consulting firm called First Class Educator. We had her on our podcast. It was episode 7. I happen to remember that. And
number 7.
Yes, she's wonderful. So she helps educators start consulting firms. So she's an excellent resource for anyone who might be in that boat.
Yes, I'll also share that on my website. So you all heard it. Episode 7.
Yes.
Check it out for those who are to specifically focus on consulting. This is really exciting. I agree with everything that you all shared, and I think one thing I would add to the conversation about contracts, because I know you mentioned sometimes you have to create the contract, sometimes they create the contract. One thing that I've noticed with the consulting that I do is you have to be crystal clear about like the HR and the financing side. So that's just one little nugget I will share with our educator friends. And I think that's can typically be an area of growth, because when you're in the school system, you're used to like getting paid monthly or biweekly. Like it's different going from salaried to the 1099, to contracting with school districts or educational organizations. And so, just really make sure you create a payment schedule and you're very clear on the payment terms anytime you are, contracting. Now, I want to give that nugget to our audience, because I get that question a lot as well. So I want to share that with people.
Definitely important. Yeah, that's one challenge. I never really shared a challenge, but I will say a challenge is you don't get a paycheck every week or every other week. You get paychecks depending on how much work you put in, and sometimes you get a bunch of paychecks at once, and then there's a lull. And so that's one challenge that I will say is on the entrepreneurial side, something you have to think about.
Yes, I agree. It is definitely a challenge. And yet still, to Christine's point, I would choose the challenges that I have as a business owner over anything else. Because days like today, when I was able to create my schedule and take my aunt to go get to her surgery and stay there with, like, it's not, I think for a lot of educators, it's not like I'm trying to, live this lavish life and just go buy a Bugatti, and like I'm not, that's not what we're trying to do. We just want to be able to have that freedom and that balance and utilize our skills, and still be able to leave something in the world, help others, but do it in a way that doesn't cause immense stress and burnout and exhaustion. So yeah, I would like to just close us out by having you all share just one, piece of advice. Again, thinking about your lived experience and all the things that you have learned in your journey. If there are educators that stumble across this video and are thinking, gosh, I'm feeling like I want to try something new. I've been thinking about it. Maybe they've already gone to your podcast and your website, and they've gone to mine, and they're still just like, yeah, I don't know. Or there's a fear there. What's something that you might, some parting words that you might want to share with them?
Do you know yours, Georgia?
I do, and I'm sort of stealing this advice from someone else, but it's just really stuck with me, and I apply it in a lot of different ways. So I'll give a shout out to someone else we had on our podcast. Her name is Sandy. I don't remember her podcast number, but she shared with us her advice for teachers was ready is not a feeling, it's a decision. And that has just stuck with me in so many ways. Even Christine and I talk about that when we go on calls. Like sometimes calls for a new contract can be really scary. And so you decide that you're confident going into that call. Like everything is a decision. And that really applies to ready. Because I think in so many things in life, we say, I don't feel ready. When am I going to feel ready? And the answer might be never. So you just have to decide that you are. And trust that if 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 you have that feeling that something else is meant for you, and just decide that you're ready and take that leap and trust that you're going to be taken care of. And that doesn't mean you quit tomorrow. It could mean the baby steps of starting something on the side while you're still there, or it's just doing some research on what jobs might be a good fit for you. Or, if you listen to a podcast like yours or ours, reach out to the podcast host. Can we have a conversation? Like I'm thinking about what you're saying and I want to talk it out. People who do shows like this want to share and talk with you. Everyone wants to help. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, hit us up in the DMs. That's my advice. No, no, do hit us up in the DMs. But I think my advice is to be flexible and stay true to your vision and your passion and your ideas and what is driving you, and be open to learning and changing and adjusting on the way. We have pivoted so many times based on conversations and based on what our audience is telling us and based on what the customer is saying and what they're telling. Okay, like, so we're hearing from you that this is ideal, or would you be willing to do XYZ, or we love this and can we also do it this way. And just especially when you're starting out, I think, and once maybe we've had more footing, I think like we'll probably pivot a little less, or maybe we'll pivot more, but I think just being able to listen, take feedback, and adjust, just like teaching, adjust your practices as you go based on your student data. It's the same thing. Just being open to growing and evolving with the process, because it's going to be better than you imagined it to be. So
Such wonderful, wonderful parting words. And I just want to make sure everyone knows, definitely go check out Making the Grade podcast, or going to makingthegradepod.com. Not only their podcast, but all of the services and wonderful things that they are doing to support educators. So visit the website. You can continue. And you just heard Christine say, send them a DM.
Yes,
On
please do.
Instagram, Making the Grade. So you can do that as
Mhm.
well. But thank you so much, Christine and Georgia. Appreciate you all just taking the time to hang out with me today. And I just look forward to continuing to follow your journey, your business journey, your life journey on social media. And I think the world is big, small. So yeah, who knows? Maybe one day we'll even meet in person. You never know.
yes,
I would love that. Thank you so much for having us.
thank
This was
you.
amazing.
Yes.
Yes,
Thank
we
you all.
absolutely love your platform. Thank you so much for having us on.
Yes. Thank you. And thank you all, educator friends. Until next time.